even before the pandemic, like nobody liked big pharma. Everyone was protesting them because of like mainly because of the whole Oxycontin thing. And it's
Hmm.
like now all of a sudden they became like, Rogan laughs about it a lot too or whatever, but it's like people started getting tattoos of Pfizer. Like,
Dude, that's
like
so wild.
yeah,
That's so
like,
wild.
oh my God, these guys, like, these people are the saviors of the human race that also have been, like, dinged for the largest criminal fine in history for fraudulent marketing, for lying to the public. It's like, why are we sitting here thinking that their business model has changed?
Thank you for taking a seat with the chairman. Welcome to Chairman of the Board.
I bet the board is spelled B-O-R-E-D.
Hey, how you doing, everyone? Welcome back to the Chairman of the Board podcast. Today, my guest is Liam DeBoer from his YouTube channel and all social media called Liam Out Loud. You might have seen him on TikTok, Instagram with some of his viral clips about culture and philosophy, among many other commentaries. Thanks for joining me today, Liam.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here. Good to have,
Definitely. And I will say, we were talking beforehand, we did shoot a whole podcast last week. And after we were done recording, none of it was usable because my mic screwed up like halfway through. So we're going to talk about some of the same things. But breaking news today that we both wanted to cover was this whole Project Veritas drop about, well, this podcast might get taken down. But yeah, the last one was unusable. This one might get taken down. But it was about how Pfizer has been, what was the term they used? Directed evolution? Was that it?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Would you like to talk
Yeah.
a little bit about directed evolution?
Well,
What's
I
going on
mean,
today?
it's pretty much gain of function. I mean, it's just one of those classic. We'll change the word so it's not the same thing that we're doing. And essentially, what he was talking about in the video is because for anyone who hasn't seen any Project Veritas stuff before, what they do is they hire people to go in and have dates with, high level up people, whether it's in CNN or in this case Pfizer, and then after a couple dates, they're always wearing a hidden camera and they try to get the person to start opening up about some of the more sketchy things that goes on behind closed doors.
And dude, and the
And
executives, sorry to cut you off, but the executives, it is shocking how stupid these people are. Because they're not just like low level employees, they're executives of these high up conglomerate corporations. And they're just revealing all this stuff to get either dick or pussy. It's hilarious. But
yeah,
anyways, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. Is there is not even really most of the time that they talk about it. Now they always do say, "Now, hey, what I'm about to tell you here, like you can't tell anyone."
Yeah, that's
But
the best
then when they
part.
talk about it, but when they talk about it, they're like bragging. It's a
Hmm.
very braggadocious tone in their voice. It's not like a, yeah, and we're really, I don't know, we're like skeptical about how all this stuff might work. So what he
Uh-huh.
revealed in this date, very like, yeah, braggingly is how they're essentially mutating the virus, the COVID virus, so that people can, or so that they can get ahead of the curve on vaccine manufacturing, and which is, and he even says it in the video, which is the exact same type of research that he thinks led to the pandemic in the first place, like the gain of function research in Wuhan. And yeah, it's just absolute insanity to yeah see how just okay they are with it. They'll call you crazy for talking about this stuff. They'll,
Hmm.
like hell, talking about that like the Wuhan lab 2 years ago would get you banned off of any social media platform like that.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, not only is that the case, but we want to continue doing it. And and then there was a second video that came out with this director because I think he's the director of scientific research at Pfizer is what
Uh-huh.
his title is. And like he's like fourth or fifth down the line from like the CEO. He's right up there.
Hmm.
And there was a second video where James O'Keefe, the head guy behind Project Veritas, comes in and confronts him at a restaurant and says like, "Hey, we've got this camera footage of you talking about these things. We'd love to hear your comments, your further comments on these." And the guy fucking loses it. Like, did you see that clip?
Full breakdown. And the part, like, it's always fun to see James walk in because you can tell he's enjoying the moment because they know they already got him and he's enjoying it. And he knows, like, oh, this is going to go viral. He immediately knows, like, yeah,
Yeah,
it was great. So,
yeah,
yeah, he starts
yeah.
attacking him, tries to grab his iPad, full on breakdown, slams the iPod on the ground or iPad on the ground. I think, like, so I was a little confused. Did the guy try and lock in James to that
Yeah,
restaurant or whatever? Like he went, how
yeah.
did he even do that? Like he had a key or was it he knew
Because
the
I was
owners?
thinking, yeah, I have no idea how that happened, like how that transpired. But
Yeah.
like what I found absolutely hilarious was, you talk about how stupid these people are at these high level positions, and it's like how like the amount of stupidity it takes to be assaulting somebody, breaking their property, all this kind of stuff, and then calling the cops, be like, I'm gonna get you in trouble. It's like that's so ridiculous. Like you're the one committing assault here,
Pure
essentially. Like
delusion.
not
Pure
that it was
delusion.
like crazy, like not that he was like throwing fists kind of stuff, but he was wrestling with them, pushing them around,
Hmm.
like yeah, grabbing their stuff. So yeah, it's just it's insanity.
He went full Karen. I mean, that's what Karens do. They go full
Yeah,
victim card when they're the perpetrators of heinous crimes and stuff. Like Karens are like low level, but this is like they're trying to infect people. Well, first off, they're doing experiments on monkeys, trying to make COVID strains more and more contagious, and they're killing animals, which PETA should be like, holy fuck, right? Like PETA doesn't even allow like animals to be slightly injured in movies. How would they be okay with this going on at Pfizer? I mean, they're probably getting paid off. Who knows? Anyways, but yeah, it's just astonishing to see the level of arrogance where they're bragging and then play the full victim once they get exposed because that's truly their inner character. That's how
yeah.
shallow these human beings are. And yeah, it's
Well,
hilarious to see.
it was the one point in the video too where he talks about where he's on the call with the whether it's 911 or whether he called the police office directly or whatever, whoever he's on the call with hoping for police help. He mentions he's like, "There's four people here. They're asking me questions, and they're all white, and I don't feel safe." And it's just like, yeah, like it's hilarious how literally just a journalist asking you a question about something you said is now like being tossed around as a hate crime, like being like
Yeah,
I'm under direct threat here. Yeah,
they think
it's
because they
insane.
push culture forward on social media towards that direction that it's enacted in law and can be enforced. When like, who said it? I think it might have been Dave Chappelle where he was like, yeah, Twitter isn't a real place. I don't care, you know?
Yeah,
And but they view it, what they've done on Twitter when they owned Twitter essentially, right? When they had large influences on these platforms, they view what they push culturally as law when it isn't. And they're so arrogant, they literally believe their own lies.
yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, it's crazy. Actually, speaking of Twitter, that you just brought that up, another good thing to talk about here is and it was only a matter of time, and he's showing that like the pressures from up top is real tough not to do that kind of stuff on Twitter. So Elon Musk just started censoring a story about India's prime minister or regime or whoever's in charge over there. Apparently there was I think it was BBC. There's like this documentary going around that talks about like some of the heinous crimes of this regime in India. And now this regime has pressured Elon, and now Twitter is censoring this documentary. So it's
Really?
like, yeah, so it's like the whole
Hmm.
free speech thing is like, it's just kind of, yeah, it's still up for
Dude,
grabs.
like I want to trust Elon so badly, but I just learned you really can't trust anyone you really. I mean, it's hard to trust people you know, even in person, right? Like everyone wears a mask in front of others, and it's hard to really know anybody, let alone someone who's a billionaire who can, anyone can put on a persona and a show. And I don't know, like I want to trust him. I'm sure many people want to trust him, but another reality is another thing. What's your opinion on Elon Musk?
I'm skeptical of anybody. Like
Mhm.
anybody at that level, because too, this is the thing, is I don't think you can operate at this level, and this isn't something I'm criticizing him for in general. I think it's actually just a problem of entity in a sense, is that when you get to that level of influence and power, don't think you can operate without doing some sketchy things. Like, for
Mhm.
instance, and Tesla's not the only company in the world. I mean, everybody from gene manufacturers to, yeah, automobile innovators are using slave labor and all this kind of stuff at the bottom of their supply chains in China. And even, you look at some of the stuff that's happening in Africa, the cobalt. And it's like, so there
Mhm.
is a certain level at when you're up there that you're like, okay, I kind of have to turn a blind eye and participate in some really bad things here. And so that's why I'm skeptical, because I don't think you can keep your hands completely clean at that
Mhm.
level. But I do also think that Elon does have overall best interests. Like, I think I don't know if he actually has the best interests of in humanity in mind, but I think he thinks he does. Like, that's what he's
Mhm.
operating on. Think
Right.
those are his general ideas. Whether it transpires that way and that's how things actually play out, and it is the best thing for humanity, is one thing. But I think that's his actual genuine goal.
Right. Like that, he believes the persona that he's putting out, maybe. Just like how these other
Yeah,
people like kind of believe their own arrogance. His arrogance just might be a positive thing.
yeah.
But yeah, you mentioned the cobalt mining. That's some dark shit. If you watch that Joe Rogan podcast about the
I actually
cobalt
haven't
mining,
watched that one yet, but yeah,
I got
yeah.
like
I mean,
halfway
it's
through it. I haven't finished, but it's pretty bad. Pretty
yeah,
bad. Yeah. And
yeah. Like,
also like I was gonna say like you know how some companies do the whole made in America thing? I see
mhm,
companies that don't even really do that anymore. They say designed in America, but and then small print, made in China. And that really makes
yeah,
me laugh because they're scamming off of the real companies that really do the effort. But it's just designed in America. It's so
yeah.
fun with the American
Yeah.
flag writing and the oh man, people will do anything
Language
to scam.
marketing is fascinating. Like, yeah, the language games in marketing is really fascinating. If you look at things like, say, McDonald's, I believe this was a thing about 10 to 15 years ago, but it was a Canadian thing. Was they would say on the menus in Canada, like 100% Canadian double A grade beef or something like that.
Mhm.
And you're like, oh, okay, like great. They're using like high quality beef. And what the loophole was is that it was really an American company manufactured in America, but the company was literally called Canadian
Oh.
grade beef. So it's like it wasn't a lie, that was the company name, but that's not the actual product they're using at all. So it's like, yeah, they definitely, like, yeah, that was a big scandal, I think.
So morally bankrupt, dude, but that is hilarious. Just like when they're
Yeah.
coming up with the idea, they must have laughed. Like when they're
Yeah.
doing it, they were laughing. Because I majored in
Yeah.
marketing in college and I was just
Okay.
around these kind of people. And it really attracts like just kind of morally bankrupt, like a lot of them. I mean, I experienced in one advertising class, like everyone in my group, maybe of 10 people, they were all lazy fucks. They didn't do any work. So me, one person out of 10, I did the whole project, the whole final project on my own. And I was like, fuck it. I'll learn more than all of them and do better for it. And then in the end, because they didn't like that I got all this attention from the teacher because I wrote this other report that was, I guess, so good that there was like an in-house advertising agency at Portland State, and he hired me on the spot for it because my essay was so good, and he's never done that in all the history of his teaching there,
Yeah.
which made my whole like group really jealous. So they took my name off the project in the Google Docs, and they all wrote their own on all these other parts. Even though I gave them credit for some things to give them enough, right? They took my name off completely and they went all against me in order to get them to level up in the ladder. And then the art director, he specifically went after me and like had arguments with the teacher claiming all my work was his. And he got hired instead of me, and I got fired because he got 9 of the other people to go along with it. And like that's how morally bankrupt. It was a great lesson to learn. Great lesson to learn. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's
marketing is
the kind of people.
crazy. And like, so I actually, we've talked about this before, but that we're both kind of in that content creation world and all this.
Mhm.
What I'm actually working on is kind of what I want to do is create ethical marketing. I don't care about the whole like the whole industry. I'm not trying to change the whole marketing world. That's like you can't.
Yeah.
It's nothing like that. But I do just want to be able to offer like ethical marketing in the sense of, hey, let's figure out if your product is actually of benefit to people. That's the only way I'll work with you.
Mhm.
I don't want to be selling snake oil or like, helping charlatans. And like let's find out how you can market it online and get it in front of people and, help kind of make a shift that way where I feel like such an issue with common day marketing is they put problems in people's heads that they don't actually have, and then they say their product will help it. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
I want to help products that are actually extremely helpful, and then, like, help solve people's problems that way. But there's kind of like a reverse engineering aspect to marketing, or it's the idea that happiness is on the other side of this product, or
Uh-huh.
good moms buy this brand, or like they've really fuck with your head that way. And so yeah, like yeah, that whole scene, or like even like what they do with all the data tracking and all that stuff too, is like it's crazy, it's fucked,
It is
it's
fucked.
so
And I'm the same exact way. Like I was looking at jobs for marketing after I graduated, and a lot of these companies, I couldn't bring myself to even apply to many of them because they're morally bankrupt. A lot of their clients and stuff. I'm like, I can't do this. So I went off on my own. I started doing my own production company, kind of the same thing like you're doing, and saying, and yeah, I'm all about ethics. And they even make you take a marketing ethics class. That's just all bullshit. And you really do the opposite in it. It's hilarious. It's called marketing. Like we were talking about earlier. What was it with? Was it with Pfizer? About how they call it, like it's not gain of function, but they call it directed evolution. It's like it's not marketing, it's marketing ethics, but it's really not. It's
yeah
all bullshit. But
yeah
I agree. And when you find a product that is genuinely a good product and you believe in it, it's easy to sell, especially if you're a good creative, because the ideas just like flow to you because you give a shit. But these other
100%.
products, it's like part of you is like, I just, no, I won't. Like you're resisting it because you know it's bad, at least good people, right? But
Yeah. Yeah, and you think about what happens on the large end of things. It's like, the classic, like Pfizer commercial where it's the girl like swiping her hands in the fields and walking and just being like all like the best time of her life, and whilst just side effects of like death and anal bleeding and all this shit fucking reads off. And you're
oh,
just
it's
like,
so funny, dude. It's so funny. And a lot of it is just subliminal messaging. And the reason why they do it, even though it's like people might consciously be like, this is bullshit. Like if you say it enough times and you hear it in the background, it'll just be implanted in your mind through repetition. Kind of like how people
for
do
sure.
like the affirmations and all that stuff just through repetition of gaining confidence or something. Same with advertising. If you just hear it enough times, if you hear McDonald's, ba 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 ba, I'm loving it. You're
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna fucking love some French fries right now. Just when you're driving the car and you see one, it's just in your mind, and you're like, golden arches, they look like French fries. I want French fries. And then you're at the menu and you get some French fries. You're like, maybe I'll get something else. And then you get some
Yeah.
other stuff. It's just the way it works, and it's kind of impressive how they manipulate the human brain, just the flaws, and not even flaws, just the way it works. It is impressive, but it's also just dirty tactics.
Yeah,
Mm.
100%. Yeah, it's and I do think that, you know, I'm not a fan of a lot of certain political systems and economic systems and all that, and I really talk out about them a lot. Like for instance, one of them being communism. Sorry, but I'm also not afraid to criticize capitalism, and I think that's one of the main issues that a lot of, say, anti-communists have is they can't even admit the flaws in capitalism. So when, like, I'll make a video, like, say, for instance, a large portion of my fan base is really not a fan of socialism and communism and all that.
Yeah.
And so, but even I'll make a video sometimes shitting on, say, democracy or capitalism and all this kind of stuff, and you'll see them just immediately position it against communism and be like, well, it's at least it's not this, and it's like, well, is that really how we want to look at things? Because I think one of the most criticizable facts about capitalism is that it just turns everybody into a consumer. Like, it's your consumer. Connor Wanders, I don't know if you know him or follow him online. He's a great commentator as well, but he says it's like, yeah, capitalism like turns you into a consumer. You're thought of as a consumer before a citizen. And it's like 100%. I think that, like, even if you look at things like, say, for instance, the healthcare system in America, for that reason, is like look at these, say, dietary guidelines that are being tossed out by the government now, and you're like, are you just trying to create customers for pharma? Like, saying that frosted mini wheats are healthier than an egg? Like, are you just trying to make people full of disease so that they have to buy, like, all these products and shit?
They did that with the food pyramid about, like, sugar compared to fats. And I don't know if it was in the 1950s or 60s or something, where they paid, Joe Rogan talks a lot about it, where I think it was like a sum of $50,000 they gave to some scientists, which was, I guess, a little bit more worth more back then, but still not like extreme amount.
Actually, with inflation in like the 50s or 60s, that'd probably be like a good, at least $250,000, probably, I'd assume.
Yeah, but even that's not like that much, because you probably had to split it. I don't know if it was 50,000 per scientist or to go.
Okay, I thought it was
I'm not sure.
person.
I don't know. Could be per or could be among them or whatever. But yeah, they were just like paid essentially to say fat is the issue and not sugar, because the sugar industry wanted to make a shit ton of money, and people still believe that. I mean, most people believe that to this day. Like, fat is really bad for you, and sugar, they don't really pay too much attention to it, and that's completely wrong, obviously.
And like, dude, what's crazy about that is that happens with everything. Like, even got it with, we've seen that happen with tobacco and all that in the past. Like, Thank You for Smoking. That's a great movie. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Oh, okay. It's great. It's literally about a guy that is a expert for the big tobacco.
I love the experts. Experts.
Yeah.
There's so many experts in the world, dude.
Exactly.
So many. Yeah.
So he goes around on all these talk shows, and his whole job is to win the public opinion on smoking is cool and smoking is good for you. Or sorry, that's what it was. Is as soon as they had to start talking, like, so it starts the movie talking about, how he's arguing about it's not that bad for you. Like, all these are just made up studies, all this, like, it's fine. It's harmless. And then once it's like definitively decided and they put the like death labels and the warnings and all that kind of stuff on the boxes, it talks about in the movie how they started transitioning to saying, like, okay, we got to make smoking cool then. If we can't talk about it being healthy, like, otherwise we'd be lying, we're liable for all these lawsuits. It's like, okay, all of our marketing has to be about cool factor now. And so it's like, it's just that behind the scenes. And you even see that too. Another great series for this is that you get to like peek behind the curtain is Dope Sick. Disney, I don't know if you've seen that. I
love that series with Michael Keaton.
So good.
So good. Yeah.
Remember at the end when they brought that expert in to start talking about how, the people that get addicted to these Oxycontins are just already addictive people. They're just addictive personalities, this and that, or whatever. And he was the same guy talking about like breakthrough pain. Like, once the tolerance started getting up there for Oxycontin, then it's like, the answer is just to give them more. And so like,
fucked.
That's
just like with vaccines. Like, give them more vaccines. Give them more.
Yeah.
You need boosters. Yeah. You have to have them. And it's amazing 100%. When people don't study history, they just do the same shit because they're like, no one's paying attention. Or at least the people that are, it's not enough to like wake everyone up so that you can just keep like feeding off of the sheep, right? It's funny. It's just crazy. It's funny and
Well,
sad.
it's insane too, like even before the pandemic, like nobody liked Big Pharma. Everyone was protesting them because of like mainly because of the whole Oxycontin thing. And it's
Hmm.
like now all of a sudden they became like, Rogan laughs about it a lot too or whatever, but it's like people started getting tattoos of Pfizer. Like,
Dude, that's
like
so wild.
yeah,
That's so
like,
wild.
oh my God, these guys, like, these people are the saviors of the human race that also have been, like, dinged for the largest criminal fine in history for fraudulent marketing, for lying to the public. It's like, why are we sitting here thinking that their business model has changed?
Just mass manipulation through media and CNN and that. I mean, people are so susceptible to messaging, and like we're seeing people wake up more and more. I would love to see accurate figures on how many people are. I wonder how you would measure that. I guess you could do like a sociological study, but
Well,
how could you
it
accurately
wasn't
measure how many people like I used to believe CNN and now I don't? Like I would be curious to see a statistic on people pre 2020 to post like 2021 or something about the stats on believing
I think
media.
they have done some surveys on that kind of stuff. And again, it's just polls. So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
it's like they really just asked, say, like 2,000 people. But
Like polls,
yeah, like
polls like
the
led people
truth.
to believe Hillary Clinton was
Yeah,
going to win, right? You know what I mean?
exactly.
So you
Yeah.
can't. It's hard to
But
trust anything. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But there is like they've done some on new media trust. And yeah, it's through the floor. And the idea, like, I look at it like it's like an abusive or a manipulative partner. Like you know how it's like if they do it right, if they're good, they just do it a little bit till you start noticing it, till you start getting fed up with it, and you're like, what
Hmm.
the fuck's going on here? And then they back off, they chill, and they're like, all right, cool. And then once you get comfortable again, they push forward,
Uh,
and then they just keep repeating that process. That's a good abuser. That's a good manipulator. But with them, they just went on full on fucking beatings with us for the last like year or two, and we're just sitting there being like stop,
yeah,
like let me, wait, what the fuck? Like you're not helping me, and
because Pfizer
yeah,
got
so I
too arrogant and they own a lot. Brought to you by Pfizer, right? And just like that guy that got caught, today by Project Veritas, that arrogance seems like it's perpetuated throughout the entire company. And they're like CNN, MSNBC, all of you, like NBC, you better keep promoting the vaccines and telling all these lies for us. And that arrogance, I think, really fucked the media and, for the most part, Pfizer. Hopefully, but yeah, I agree with you.
100%. There was actually a really good debate recently too on media. It was called it's called it was the Monk debates, and the essentially the topic was should we trust mainstream media? And Douglas Murray, who is a brilliant man, he
Mm.
was on the art side of no, we shouldn't trust mainstream media, along with Matt Taibbi, who's an amazing independent journalist. On the for side, that yes, like mainstream media is a trustworthy institution, was Malcolm Gladwell, the famous author, and then I can't remember the other person's name, but they were an editor or something like that at New York Times. Like
Hmm.
they worked at the Times, and they went into the debate polling the audience what they thought, like, do you trust the mainstream media? And the audience was like, it was pretty much like a 50-50 split. I think it was like 52% said yes, 48% said no. Like it was very narrow. And then
Interesting.
at the end of the debates, Matt Taibbi and Douglas Murray just fucking mopped the floor was with them. Like it was embarrassing. Like by the end of it, Malcolm Gladwell was just straight up making like same kind of thing as this guy, this Pfizer dude in the thing. He was like, "Well, yeah, this is just Matt Taibbi just doesn't trust journalism anymore because it's not newsrooms full of old white men anymore and like all
Oh,
this shit." He was just like pulling the race card, like this is why, like he just wants it to be racially pure, which was just insane if you listen to what Taibbi was saying. And yeah, at the end of the debates, it was like 70% of people said like I don't trust the media. Like so it was like they swung almost half of the people that walked in there thinking they trusted the media, which was
see,
really interesting.
Now that's the power of a free exchange of ideas, right? Which wasn't possible on Twitter until very recently. So that is definitely one good thing Elon Musk has done, is allowed the marketplace of ideas to come back, because the truth will have its day. Like, it will win when it's allowed to be spoken. And it's just so good to see independent journalists like Matt Taibbi rising up, and all these other people. And even like ex-politicians like Tulsi Gabbard, she's kind of taken the mantle too of being almost a journalist now from being a politician. And it's just really good to see that. Like, it gives me hope. It gives me a lot of hope to see good people rising up, and like just everyday people running for positions in government and winning them a lot in this last election. And yeah, what do you think is what is your view on the next like 5 years of America, and because you're in Canada as well?
Yeah, I think we're on a teeter-totter right now, and it's like, which side will it go to? And I really look at it as like, yeah, centralization and decentralization, and that's the fight. It's like, you've got the bitcoins of the world versus the central bank digital currencies that are going to be starting to try to fight for take hold, because digital currencies will be a thing, but it's whether it's going to be a highly regulated central bank kind of digital currency, or if it's going to be a completely decentralized, no oversight Bitcoin kind of currency. Or even, for instance, you're looking at like a war of information going on right now. There's a lot of in the government, push to, for instance, even in Canada right now, there's the Bill C-11, which is trying to get going through our parliamentary system right now. Sorry, it's in our Senate actually right now. So it got through our parliament, and it would give the government complete oversight over social media platforms. They could downrank all posts what they want. They would make it so that, like, for instance, in Canada, our radio, you have to play like the radio stations in Canada have to play like 25% content of Canadian musicians, kind of thing. That's what they're like making the disguise as, is being like, oh yeah, we just want, to take Netflix, to take Instagram, to take YouTube, to take all these platforms, and we just want to, promote, we just want to make it so that we can promote Canadian content to people. And it's like,
Yeah.
fucking right. Yeah, that might be what you're saying, but we all know that you're really going to just be taking down anybody who says anything you don't like. Even
They're using
recently,
the guise of nationalism, essentially.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And even actually recently, there was a guy who had the police show up at his door because of comments he made about Trudeau online. And
That's so
now,
fucked.
granted, it was kind of one of those things where he was like, I want to see Trudeau hung, or like something like that. It was like violent in nature, but I also look at it and go like, this is an account with 50 people who's like, obviously he wasn't like an organized person at all. He was kind of just your typical kind of like white trash pickup truck ad. He was like, it's like, obviously this guy isn't like an actual like a Unabomber situation where he's got like the capabilities of it, and like he's living in the middle of suburbia kind of thing. But you see all of this other stuff that just goes completely under the rug, that never gets addressed in like Law and Order. And it's like, so you're just like, this is really what our resources are going towards, is like scaring people online essentially to like not talk online. And yeah, so I think it's pretty sketchy. And I mean, they did that even in America with the DHS. They had backdoor portals to all the social media sites, right? And you saw the FBI had like a team of, it was something like 100 FBI agents were constantly flagging stuff and taking down Twitter posts and censoring and get this person kicked off. Like accounts with like minimal followers, like that had zero activity going on. And you're like, how is this where our resources are going? Like, we're literally...
Well, I think it spreads the message of like, by word of mouth, like, hey, I got taken down for blah, blah, blah. And people then will start self-censoring, right? That the word will spread like, oh, I don't want to get taken down. And then if you can't pass it into law, you can just scare everyone with fear of losing what they built up. And if you're like a business, let's say, like a lot of businesses are like big on Facebook, and you can even buy things for their business through Facebook and whatever, and their marketplace. So if you have a large portion of your business through social media sites, like Instagram, you can buy tons of stuff as well. You're risking feeding your family if you want to express any opinions. And like, if they don't like what you say, even on a personal page, they can go, because I know this happens on YouTube. If you have one email connected to many accounts and you say one thing on one account, they'll take down all your accounts, even if they're about separate things completely. And you only sit on one video on one account. So it is a fear tactic essentially for self-censorship, because at least we have freedom of speech in this country. In your country, you don't have that law. Most people think, oh, Canada has freedom of speech, right? But you don't have the same protections we do over here. And they're withering away over here, but over there, you'd never had that in the first place.
Yeah, Canada is kind of sketchy on that front. Like, we don't have nearly as much. Like, even Trudeau said it recently when, because he's trying to do a gun buyback program, like completely like a mandated one, and he's completely freezing the sale of all guns, all this kind of stuff, and like, we don't have any right to bear arms, essentially written in our it's our Charter of Rights. But he even said on an interview, because I think the interviewer asked him something along the lines of like, well, are you harming people's ability to protect themselves in these scenarios? And his answer was, well, Canadians don't have a right to do that. They actually, we don't have laws in place that protect people if they shoot somebody intruding their home. Like, that's illegal. Like, they can go to jail for that. So it's like, yeah, we don't, like, it's sketchy on that.
And his
front.
answer wasn't based on the right thing to do. It's like, well, you don't have that right. It's not like, well, you should. He didn't like process information of like, we should maybe have this right. It's like, you already don't, so I can do whatever the fuck I want, which is a tyrant. It's an authoritarian leader. It's not even, I won't even use the word leader. He's just an authoritarian. He's
just a mouthpiece. He's just a fucking meat puppet.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, also, I want to talk about how I've seen you. We talked about this on the last podcast a little bit, because you do comment on culture, which is a lot of politics and things like that. But also, there are other parts of culture, such as entertainment and comedy. And you've done videos on people like Mark Norman and the importance of comedy and comedians in society. And you told me last podcast that you even got to work with Mark Norman a little, which is really cool. But you might repeat yourself a little bit here from last podcast. But what do you feel is the role of comedy and comedians in society, and the role of truth within comedy?
Yeah, I think that is the kind of comedian's job, is to mock the things that shouldn't be mocked, because, the old thought about, the only person that laugh at themselves is the tyrant. And it's kind of like, all right, so we need to be constantly, tossing out jokes, making fun of people, seeing who thinks they're untouchable, who thinks that they're, I'm 100% right. How dare you even laugh at the concept of my ideas or what I do or this or that, because I'm so in line with morality and all of this kind of stuff. And so I think that's the comedian's job, is to, kind of find what that is, expose them a little bit, but then also, like, the idea is like, laughing about something really strengthens truth in a sense too. Like, truth can take mockery, because like it'll hold up. Like, it doesn't, like, it's one of those it's like one of those things where, when people are like, say in a mocking tone and be like, "Oh, is that what you really think?" Like kind of like making something sound stupid. It's like if you do that with a truthful idea, you sound stupid. Like if you're like,
Exactly.
"Oh, what, working out makes you healthy?" It's like you sound dumb because you're mocking the truth,
Hmm.
which shows that that you're out of line. So like, yeah, it's one of those things where I think, yeah, comedians are very important for that. And I think you've mentioned it before too, where even somebody like Jordan Peterson has talked about this, where it's like they're the canaries in the coal mines. Like when we'll start trying to come after the comedians, then you got to wonder who's next. And I think the thing that I find most interesting is you can look at comedians now and say like, oh my god, it's so dangerous, and like the cancel culture and all this kind of stuff, and it is true that is there, and I despise it. But I also don't think that this has ever not been the case, because you look back to, the 1950s, or like the Lenny Bruces of the world getting locked up for swearing, or even,
Yeah.
go into another lane with, like, say Elvis wasn't allowed, his bottom half wasn't allowed to be shown on TV because he was too sexual. So it's like I think the pendulum of what gets essentially targeted as the political correctness, which George Carlin, great comedian, well, actually,
Mm.
like fucking phenomenal comedian, has a great saying where he says, political correctness is fascism disguised as manners. And I'm like, yeah, like that's 100% spot on. And yeah, so I think that's why it's like, yeah, we need to the idea of whatever's politically correct at the time, whether that's 1950s extreme conservatism that, would want ladies, not showing their ankles because it's too provocative, or like if you're in that kind of culture, you need to mock those ideas. If you're in the culture now where, the whole idea that every single white person is inherently oppressive, and then it's like those are the ideas that also need to be mocked at the moment.
Couldn't agree more. And yeah, even now, like would almost say as a comedian myself that cancel culture is a good thing because it gives you something to, if you're like a comedian, at least with some integrity, at least, to say the truth, make it funny, take the risk. And when you take that risk, you have the potential to explode because people are always seeking the truth and seeking comedy in the truth, right? It's refreshing to hear it. And people are getting tired, I believe, of all the woke garbage. Like it's not, and by the way, I hate the word woke because it's literally the opposite of what it is. Don't you find
Yeah.
that too? When they say, well, they always inverse everything that they do. They're always doing the
Well,
wrong thing.
Bill Burr has got a great joke about that. I think it was in his Red Rock special, or maybe it was the one right before that. Is talking about how like woke, like the term woke is like all these like hipster white kids that took it and like started, this whole woke culture. It's
Uh,
like call themselves that was cultural appropriation in the first place, because it was a very common word in the black culture, because it was like, yeah, like it was those who had kind of like woken up to the idea that they didn't have to be who, everybody told them they had to be, all of this kind of stuff, that they could break out of these molds and like all of that. And yeah, so it is funny in that sense, where they're kind of even going against their own stated values by
yeah,
even,
they're
yeah.
just so contradictory that when they are faced with reality, they react like the Pfizer executive and they just all the all the ideas in their brain just it fries them because they can't
Yeah.
deal with the truth. What's it called? Cognitive dissonance, right? Where you
Yeah.
have these contradictory ideas of lies you've been telling yourself and you start to believe them. And then when you're revealed with the truth, it breaks your brain and you
Yeah.
go mental. And like we talked about this on the last podcast of, for some people, they won't believe the truth until they're like, if you show them the camps of people being like in concentration camps or something, they're like, oh, it's still not happening, right? Because they believe so many
Yeah.
lies and they won't believe it until they're actually in the camp themselves. And that's exactly what
Yeah.
happened to the Pfizer guy. You know, he now
Yeah.
he's fucked. You know,
Yeah,
I was imagining his life because he's freaking out because he knows his life is over to the point where he was even saying, "No, I was just lying. I was lying on the date to impress them. I was lying. I was lying. I was lying." So he's admitting he's a liar to save the company, so they probably don't like come after him or even probably maybe kill him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
So also
It's
you're.
crazy.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say actually, I have a buddy named Dan Garrick who he's got an Instagram. He's really good. He's a writer. He's got an Instagram called The Handmade Mind. But he has talked about this concept with me before, where people will throw accusations of you, like say for instance, this whole whatever social justice warrior crowd, the woke crowd, all of this kind of stuff. They throw these accusations at you because then if you are to say it back to them, like if you're to catch them in the act of what they're doing, then there isn't as much weight to your accusation if they've accused you first. Like, for instance, of racism, like they'll say, like, oh, white people are racist, blah, 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 here's why. And then all of a sudden, behind that just comes this like curveball of all this racism towards white people. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like it's so that when you turn around, you can't be like, no, you're racist, because then it literally just sounds you sound like an idiot trying to
Yeah,
argue
yeah.
them.
And I believe that's a
So yeah,
tactic in the book 48 Laws of Power Robert Greene
oh, is
talks
it?
about. I think it is, yeah.
Okay.
I haven't finished the whole book, but I
Actually, I
remember
haven't read
that
that
towards the beginning.
one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on too, and that's a lot of what's happening is just complete projection of what they're doing onto anybody who questions what they're doing. So it's like I'm gonna
100%.
beat you to the punch. I'm gonna accuse you of what you're on to me for. It's
100%.
like
100%.
yeah, it's like if you killed somebody and the body's buried in your backyard, and it's like as the cops are at your door, you're just like, my fucking neighbor's a murderer.
Oh, that would be actually a pretty funny sketch. You could probably, I
That would,
mean, at least for a little bit, you could probably convince them. Like they would go to the neighbor's house if you said that. If you stood on where the body's buried and you're like, I just saw them do this and I came to check out what happened here, you might want to go check out. They would have to go do it. It should be, yeah.
yeah.
Interesting.
I think that's what's at play culturally here a lot too.
Hmm. So two last topics I want to cover real quick is you talk a lot about philosophy and also a lot of your videos are in the style of comic books. And on your channel, you talk about how you roast a lot of the villains in the world and champion heroes, which I think is fantastic. Last podcast that didn't air and wasn't usable, we talked about the World Economic Forum and Davos a little bit. And I did read a little bit about the because you mentioned last podcast about like the 15-minute cities, and I thought that was a wild because I didn't really know too much about it. But the concept about 15-minute cities is basically you have to live in a city where everything you'll ever need is within 15 minutes of where you're at, correct? And if you
Walk
walk,
15 minutes.
walk,
So it's
within
even
15 minutes.
smaller. Yeah, so it's even smaller if you don't think about car travel. It's like a 15-minute walking radius.
That's nuts. I didn't even know it was the only walking part. Um, and then if you go outside of that area, you could even be, if you leave enough times, first off, they're going to like tax you on your carbon footprint, right? And
Yeah.
then if you leave enough times, they can even arrest you. Like this is the
Yeah.
direction they want to go in, which is horrifying.
It's
I just wanted to,
literally Hunger Game districts.
yes, it is. You're right. It is. Oh my
It's
God, dude.
like that's not even kind of like hyperbole or exaggeration on my end. Like it's literally districts.
I was trying to
It's
connect what it was. I'm like, oh, that's it. They're literally trying to make the Hunger Games, dude. That's so fucking wild. I actually
These
rewatched it
places-
recently, and it's such a good series. Like, and
Yeah.
they talk a large amount about the use of propaganda in the last two movies, and I thought they did a spot on job at how the propaganda is used by governments.
Yeah,
It's kind of like an educational
yeah.
movie, especially nowadays.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought the second and third Hunger Games kind of lacked on a movie aspect, like some of the story stuff and all that, but the mechanisms in the movies and the things that they talk about, yeah, 100% spot on. And two, like a great thing that they do is like they show about how revolutions like turn on their head, right? With not because it's President Snow is like the head of the tyrannical government, and then
Mhm.
there's Coin, who's the leader of the revolution. How she even like false flagged, killed all the kids out front of the Capitol and made it look like the evil government did it as a way to get rally support to go against them, and was essentially killing her own people to, yeah. And so it's like it shows how even like all of that shit has happened in past revolutions.
Mhm.
So they nailed it.
And the crazy part about that
For
too is like when because President Snow knew what she did. What's her name? Coin, the leader of the rebellion.
Yeah,
Yeah, he knew, and he's like, that was pretty smart. Like,
yeah,
because that's how they
yeah,
both. It shows how like they are both sides, no pun intended, of the same coin. That they
yeah.
just they think the exact same way. And Katniss Everdeen knew the right thing to do, and she fucking shot her with an arrow, which I thought was a great ending. You know, I don't probably most people didn't even understand the true representation and meaning of what happened, or were confused. But if you can understand it, like it was pretty powerful the way
Yeah,
that series ended.
for
Um,
sure.
so yeah, I just wanted to ask you again, like about what are some people that what are some villains real quick in the list that you think are worthy of roasting or that you have roasted, and who are some champions you think are worthy of championing, or ones you have and haven't? How would you say that word? To champion or
Campino.
championing? Yeah, it's hard to
Yeah.
say.
Um, yeah, I think the most roastable one is good old Billy Beef Tits, the walking milk bag, Bill Gates. Uh, he's a
Have you
fucking
ever heard
he's
like Joe Rogan just roast him for 5 minutes, his body, after he was trying to give like health advice? It's great.
no,
It's so
I
silly.
didn't. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah, like yeah, he's got to be top of the list. He's just a raging narcissist, and he has been since the 90s. And it's actually it's phenomenal when you look back at how well he pulled it off, which was in the 90s, he was like loathed publicly. Like everybody, he had got the Department of, I think it's the Department of Justice who does this, but they did the antitrust laws thrown against him for essentially monopolizing the computer and software space and all of this kind of stuff. So he's always been a ruthless businessman. He's always been a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But after that happened, he like completely changed his public demeanor and did a 180, and all of a sudden went and started the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and now I'm a philanthropist and I do all this in the name of world health and all, like I want to make the world a better place.
And
And
he
it's like
started wearing
if you look,
sweaters. Like he changed his
yeah,
image. He would wear sweaters and everything. So far, back to the propaganda. It's all about image, all of it. It's hilarious.
yeah. And if
Uh-huh.
you look at what he's doing now, you're like, he's doing the exact same shit to the world, to world health, to like
Uh-huh.
literally the like he's monopolizing the vaccine space, all of this kind of stuff. He's helping with all of that. I think he's I think I can't remember if he actually passed them, but I know he was on pace to pass China as the leading entity donating to the World Health Organization. So it's like like the World Health Organization essentially owes as much to Bill Gates as they do everyone else. And like, look at it and would be like, oh well, the World Health Organization isn't corrupt. Like they're this like non-governmental body, and it's like, well, if all of their money comes from say countries like China or people like Bill Gates, and I think USA was the third on that list, but if like they're getting all their money from them, their funding, it's like they are beholden to them because, okay, all of a sudden the WHO starts doing things that aren't in line with what Bill Gates or China or America wants.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, we're just going to pull our funding. And now the WHO tanks. So it's like they're in cahoots.
It's just
And
like
it's
being
interesting.
brought to you by Pfizer. Same thing. Or
Yeah.
politicians get
Yeah.
lobbied. All the same principles. We need some like decentralized. I don't know how you would do it, but just where it isn't dependent on but they need a source of funding that isn't beholden to doing favors. You know what I mean? Like, I don't.
You want to hear something? Yeah, you want to hear
Yeah.
something crazy? Is in Canada, our government funds. There's like I think there's 3 or 4 networks that get the majority of the funding, which is like CBC, which is it would be like our NPR, like our government news kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then there's propaganda, and then there's like a couple other ones, like the Toronto Star is a big newspaper, CTV, and if I think 1 or 2 other organizations. The government funds media organizations to the tune of $1.4 billion. And it's like, okay, so you don't think the news is just telling you exactly what the government wants you to tell you? Like, how can you ever like trust the news to properly report on what the government's doing? If they're doing anything sketchy, they would go under. It's like it would literally take like 2 or 3 months of them trying to uncover things that the government is doing before they would be bankrupt because
Well, here's why: is because people are watching Netflix and porn and playing video games, and they don't know any of this or really care. There's a lot of people who are like, "Fuck it, I don't care," whatever. Because everyone's like depressed now and feel like a victim, and just there's so many distractions and victim mentality that just most people are just too consumed by all these other things that they're just like, fuck it, whatever. Let them, they want to rule the world, whatever. Like, I think a lot of people even inherently might know. They're just like, whatever. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a big kind of mental heuristic here on that front where it's like people convince themselves they can't do anything about it. So it's like, why would I pay attention if I can't do anything about it? And you're like, realize that that's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. And that's kind of like the lane I'm in, and the things that I focus on is like, I'm not sitting here trying to lead campaigns against anybody or like completely change the world. I'm just trying to bring awareness to some of these things, because that's all it takes is public perception is the biggest piece of the puzzle to these people, whether it's Bill Gates, whether it's the president of the United States, whether it's Justin Trudeau, whether it's any of these like oligarch type figures. Public perception is so key to them. So if all it is you literally understanding that this person isn't or doesn't care about you, then that is enough to actually make some change, because then they have to start acting differently if you actually know who they are. But if they can convince you they're this person that does everything for your benefit or whatever, then they can do things behind behind your back. Like, so it's like, yeah, it's
even if you can just get people to start questioning, not even to truly believe something negative about them, just to question the actual narrative they're perpetrating. Just, I believe that's enough, because once you start having little questions and finding little breadcrumbs, it'll lead you down a trail of, oh, wait. And then you actually might start caring, just even out of curiosity. And then you start, that's how people fall down rabbit holes, which can be dangerous too, right? If you go too far, and then you're like, oh, what is true? And then, but.
To that point, I think something very important to do as well is to question your own narratives, your own beliefs. Not it's like, yes, question the ones that people are trying to convince you of, question the ones that you convince yourself of. Like, figure out if, like, look, if you hate Joe Biden, try to ask yourself, like, why do I hate Joe Biden? Do I hate Joe Biden because I listen to Fox News every night and I just hear them they just make me angry about it for 2 hours? If you hate Donald Trump, ask yourself the same question. Do I hate Donald Trump just because I listen to CNN and they hate Donald Trump? Like, figure out where these ideas and beliefs are coming from, or hell, even whether it's Christianity, whether it's flat earth, all of this shit. Like, figure out where you're getting these beliefs from. Like, and I think that's probably one of the most important ones. But it's funny too, like, I've noticed even when I post on social media kind of things, if I'm like talking about a subject, like let's say I'm talking about Bill Gates or something going on with all that, people hop all over it, and they're all of a sudden ready to give their opinion, and they're engaging, and they're right in. But then I just like I'll make a post, say like one recent one I did where I was talking about how we're all evil, we all have the capacity for evil, and we tend to project the issues of the world onto a certain group or a certain religion or any of these kind of things. And Carl Jung has a great idea where he goes, even if I am not an accessory to the crime, thanks to my human nature, I'm always a potential criminal. It's like you have to remember that. And it's like, but so I'll post something like that and it gets like very little engagement because people are like, oh, I don't want to think about myself. Like I don't want to think
Very
about
true.
myself in a
People are scared. A lot of people are scared of themselves, self-reflection, and even their own potential, like we talked about, to even try and do something. People avoid it because that means, like if they truly believe they're a good person and they find out they could do something, that means they have to start working on something. And a lot of people kind of would rather do nothing than be like, oh shit, I have to do something here. I have to, you know? So they just avoid even discovering.
Problem, you have to fix it.
What do you say?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, if you identify a problem, you have to fix it.
Exactly, right. And as long as you don't identify it, they believe ignorance is bliss. But here's the thing, ignorance is bliss until, let's say you love guns, right? Ignorance is bliss until you realize Justin Trudeau is like, okay, well, you don't have the Second Amendment, so I'm just going to take all your guns. And you're like, wait, I wasn't paying attention. Uh-oh, now everything's gone. Oh, I love freedom of speech. Doesn't Canada have freedom of speech? Oh, wait, we don't? Oh, they're going to start regulating everything we say? Uh-oh, this is a problem. So it's ignorance is bliss until the bill comes due. And people don't really even want to think about the bill coming. They just want to enjoy whatever they're consuming at that time, which is like, again, the distractions of Netflix, porn, video games, whatever. So,
well, there's that great quote about 1930s Germany before the war kicked off, where I can't remember who said it, but the quote was something along might not be verbatim, but pretty spot on. They said, first they came for the socialists and I didn't speak up. Then they came for the unionists and I didn't speak up. Then they came for the Jews and I didn't speak up. And they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me.
Oh, it's so powerful.
Yeah, so it's like it's 100% spot on, and that's why it's like I think it's so important too. And it's funny because you talk about some of these things, and people be like, "Oh, why are you so concerned? Why are you thinking about that kind of stuff? It's out of your control." And you're like, "Because I'm trying to stop the fucking dominoes here. Like it's a lot harder to stop the last one."
It's like I'm trying to stop the dominoes, and then people will be like, "Hey, why are you being such a downer right now?" It's like, it's not really being a downer. Like this stuff is important. It's going to matter to you down the line. You're just not, you're just not paying attention here. Like if enough people just paid attention and decided to solve it all at once, it would be solved. And then we could just move forward all together. Right. 100%. And like, not even in peace, like people don't even understand there's a difference between peace and harmony. People are always like, let's have world peace, which just means like, let's stop essentially fighting. But harmony means let's work together to move forward. I believe right now it's kind of slim, but I believe it's possible that we could have harmony among our worlds, or countries for our world, especially with the possible economic collapses of a lot of our nations moving forward. I don't know if you've seen, what was his name? Was it Peter something on Joe Rogan recently? He's, I think he was an economist. He was talking about how China's going to collapse pretty soon and Russia's economy. And
something or something like that.
Something. Yeah, it was a really good episode. I mean, I don't know how much
I haven't listened to the Joe Rogan episode with him, but I have watched some of his videos and he is good. Like even he's taught me some stuff about Canada that I had no idea with, which was like crazy to show how stupid Canada is. It's like, so all of our provinces have a lot of power, kind of like how the states, each individual state would have a lot of autonomy. Inside of Canada, there isn't good trade deals. There isn't. So our provinces trade less with one another than we do with America. So every single one of our provinces, there's one province, and I think it's Nova Scotia, that trades more with within Canada than south. But other than that, all of our economy is going up and down through America, our buying and our selling. It's like because there's no essential framework for them to trade with one another legally, and it's like so. But yeah, so he's very smart. He's very
Yeah.
intelligent for sure.
That's really
But
interesting. Like
yeah,
your country isn't really even united because I think like in the United States, I think we do help each other quite a bit, at least economically. Like I know Oregon gives like a lot of water because we get a lot of rain here to California during their droughts and stuff like that. I know we do help each other with resources quite a bit. That's interesting to hear about Canada versus the United States. Because at least
yeah,
culturally, I think we do have some. Well, I mean, now it's more tense than ever. I think where everyone's like, if California fell into the ocean, fuck it, Or a lot of people believe Oregon, California, and just all of that stuff. Which is like, well, we're still all together. Like I'm here in Oregon, so I'm kind of like shit. You know, I kind of,
yeah,
I don't like what's going on here, but I don't think everyone should die. But
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're very similar in that way too, where we do have a lot of differences, and they are starting to kind of pull and get a little bit more tense. Things like, for instance, Quebec. Quebec has always, like back in the 70s and stuff, we even had like terror attacks like from our own like population.
Mm.
And they ended up like calling martial law and all that, like for like Quebec separatists, and that's always kind of been on the table. And then even lately, ever since federal government has been pushing the whole green energy uh, bullshit. um, they've been putting high taxes and really getting in the way of production of energy for things like Alberta. So a lot of our federal policies are really hurting Alberta as a state because that's where all the oil sands in production for oil happens. And they're now very big on the idea of separating and kind of being like, all right, like let's get out of Canada, like let's be our own thing then.
Hmm.
If you guys are gonna kind of protect our economies, if you're gonna be actively sabotaging them, essentially. So
Kind of like how Texas
it's
always is here, essentially. Like they
yeah,
always want to separate all the time, and yeah, they've been trying that for like decades and decades.
just it's just kind of a laughing matter at that point.
Yeah, it pretty much is. So let's close with philosophy. Like, what's one favorite quote you have from your favorite philosopher?
Let's give a different one than what I talked about last time. A great quote from I already quoted him earlier. Carl Jung would be until you understand the subconscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. It's like, so that's kind of feels pretty spot on to what we were talking about, where it's like, I really feel like people, yeah, going back to the questioning your beliefs or even the marketing conversation we had as well, figuring out like, yeah, even not even necessarily questioning your beliefs, like questioning your cravings. Like, why am I craving this thing? Am I craving this thing because the fucking TV made it look so delicious? But I'm gonna go get it because because my subconscious is completely been fucked with, and then I'm gonna be disappointed with myself as a human being afterwards.
Uh,
Like so yeah, I think that's a good one, definitely.
I couldn't agree more. And I don't know with you, but for me, when I've seen that quote before as well, and I had just like discovered that on my own. And then when you like discover it, and then you're changing your behavior, and then you read a quote from someone you respect, you're like, oh shit, that's so cool. You know,
Yeah,
has that ever happened to
100%.
you? And you're like, when you had just fixed something in your own brain, and then you read like a quote from someone you respect, and you're like, oh shit, am I as smart as him? Or
Yeah.
like yeah, it kind of like boosts your ego up a little bit. But
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
that's a great quote. So yeah, whatever you want to plug, wherever you are, just kind of tell everyone where they can find your content.
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all Liam Out Loud. My YouTube is, I think you can find me searching Liam Out Loud as well. But there's another young kid that has the same username. And but so you can find my channel on YouTube is called Liam DeBoer. Yeah, I make videos all about, like, say, even the history of the public school system, where things about certain kind of misunderstandings about climate change, all that. Um, yeah, go deep into some topics and try to figure stuff out. So, yeah, any of those
Yeah.
platforms you'll be able to find me.
And you got that good short form content on TikTok and Instagram, and then you get long form videos, which I also highly recommend on his YouTube channel. And I couldn't recommend him more. He's a great follow, and thank you again, Liam, for joining me today. Another great conversation. Sorry, the last one isn't airable. That was a great one too, but this one I think was probably even better. I really enjoyed it. So thank you, Liam.
All right, bye, buddy.